Hi folks, this is Don Meissner with the North Country Fishing Report. You know, one of the things is I'm asking people about how the fishing is. I'm always thinking, okay, so what size baits are you using? And I asked my buddy Dave Swanson on Cayuga Lake this very question because he had done some videos with him having great luck fishing for largemouth bass right now. He has cameras set up in his kayak where you can see, and he has a camera in his glasses, which you can see what he's seeing, and you can see those fish hitting. And I said, Dave, were you using your frog to do this? Because he recently had a great day on the lake, right in bluebird skies catching largemouth bass. And he said, no. He said, I was using one of my swim baits. And I said, what size? He says, it's funny you ask that because I make that swim bait, and it's got a paddle tail on it in both a 3.8 inch and a 4.3 inch. And he said it's only a half an inch difference, but most of the fish were preferring the 4.3. And he said both baits I was using were the same color. So it wasn't about the color. For some reason, he got a lot more strikes on that bigger bait. And I think that's really important to remember. A lot of times, you know, we may be using the wrong size bait. I think I do that all the time when I'm fishing the Grass River and other tributaries. I'll go out there with little bitty baits that I think I can catch the most fish on. But when I fished with my buddy Rust, and especially when we've been fishing in the Racket River, we would go way upstream in his canoe and drift down, and there's some wonderful stretches above Potsdam where we've caught some of the most beautiful smallmouth bass you can imagine. But what I've noticed is I'll have on the same baits that I use in the Grass River, these small baits that I've told you about a lot of times. And he'll be using one of these big paddle-tailed swim baits that he uses for largemouth bass. And for some reason, those smallmouth, now we're talking about river smallmouth that maybe are 12 to 13 inches long, will hit that 4.3 inch paddle tail that he's using that Dave Swanson, my buddy, makes. Russ catches more smallmouth. When I say small, it's when we're comparing the size of these fish to the monsters that live in the St. Lawrence River. But if you were using a 4.3 inch bait, even in the St. Lawrence, you'd think, are you using something that big for smallmouth? Most of your drop shot baits aren't that big, and yet they can work wonderfully. So remember, the size of the bait can make a tremendous difference. And sometimes those fish will just key on something small. It's not that big is always better than small. It isn't. But I think it's something you should be aware of. And another thing with that conversation with Dave about the size of the paddle tails, and he was telling me that he was using the same color. It was sort of a natural color that had, he said, a pewter body and sort of a green back. And I said, Dave, did you use some of the bright colors like people love, like chartreuse and white? Have you compared? And he said, yeah, they seem to prefer the natural colors the way he's fishing them. So color does matter, but a lot of times size is far more important than color. So remember this the next time you go out. Until next time, folks, this is Don Meissner with the North Country Fishing Report.